Love soul, saving the sinner, Jesus the giver of hope.
This morning I want to talk to you about overcoming jealousy. Overcoming jealousy. It's part of the human condition that no one is exempt from. Now, as I look across your wonderful, beautiful congregation, Pastor Mark, what I can tell, and the metrics of measurement is, this is a multi-generational church. You don't just have some young people and then some veteran people. You have all of them in between, and all of them. How many of you know if you're not dead, God's not done with you? And so there's just this wonderful sense of camaraderie, but different generations have different values and different ways of seeing the world, different styles of music, different styles of clothing. Hello. But do you know what unifies us truly? Is that we are all a member of the selfie generation. If you've ever taken a selfie, wave your right hand at me. No, your other right, honey. Good, okay, yeah, good. So this is the first time in human history where you're able to look into the lens of your camera and see yourself. It's never happened. We're members of the selfie generation. A couple weeks ago, I was in Seattle, and we were walking through Pike Street Market where they throw the salmon at you, and they catch it and wrap it, and you take it home and eat it. And I was talking to, I saw these two girls, and they were taking a picture. I said, I walk up, I'm rather friendly. And so I went, I said, would you like me to take a picture of you? And the girl looked at me like I was the devil. She says, we're taking a selfie. Well, excuse me for your selfiness. We live in an age, irrespective of where we live, because we live when and where we live in human history, where we're all about self-confidence, self-esteem, self-worth, self-evaluation, self-help. That four-letter word self is a naughty word, and it ought to be. Because every time I look at social media, do you know what I feel? I feel a little insecure. And I feel a little jealous because social media is basically a human highlight reel of everyone's wonderful successes. I mean, when's the last time you saw someone post a picture of their very worst hair day of the month? This is when my hair looked like the devil. It was ugly. Satan invaded my head. There it is. Oh yeah, I was driving under the influence of alcohol and had a bad night in jail. What a wonderful day. People aren't talking about their lowlights, they're talking about their highlights. And what that tends to promote is a sense of jealousy and a sense of insecurity and a sense of defeatism where we begin to compare ourselves one to another. And we say something like this, God, I think you got it right with Pastor Mark. He's 60 with a full head of hair. But you missed something in my genetic gene pool. And I'm a little insecure. We begin to compare ourselves one to another, and we begin to evaluate ourselves and say, God, I like how you made them, but I think you might have missed it with me. I want to read to you this morning from the book of 1 Samuel, and the title of my message is Sing Another's Song. Sing Another Song. Here's the backdrop. The very first king in the nation of Israel was a man by the name of Saul in 1025 BC. Now, King Saul was touched by God and said, you're going to be the king because the people want a king, so I'm going to give them a king, and you're the king. Now, there's this conflict that's happening from the Philistine nation who's coming against the Jewish nation, and there's a representative of the Philistines, and his name is Goliath. Now, Goliath isn't just your average warrior. Goliath is actually 2.8 meters tall, 228 kilos, and he's a giant. And he's spitting out blasphemies, and he's talking about how horrible the God of the Jews are, and he's talking about how strong his gods, lowercase g, are. And there's this I dare you to come fight me attitude. And there's a little shepherd boy by the name of David, and he is 1.75 meters, and he's 68 kilos, and he says, the same way I killed the lion and the same way I killed the bear is the same way I'm going to kill that giant. Let me at him, King Saul. King Saul's at a loss, and he doesn't know what to do, so he lets David at him. We pick up the story in 1 Samuel chapter 18 because David was successful. After David had finished talking with Saul, he met Jonathan, the king's son. And there was an immediate bond of love between them, and they became besties. From that day on, Saul kept David with him and wouldn't let him return home. And Jonathan made a solemn pact with David because he loved him, check this out, as he loved himself. Jonathan sealed the pact by taking off his robe and giving it to David, together with his tunic, sword, bow, and belt. Whatever Saul asked David to do, David did it successfully. So Saul made him a commander over the men of war, an appointment that was welcomed by the people and Saul's officers alike. When the victorious Israelite army was returning home after David had killed the Philistine, women from all the towns of Israel came out to meet King Saul, and they sang and danced for joy with tambourines and cymbals. This was their song. Saul has killed his thousands. Saul has killed his thousands. Saul has killed his thousands. Wicka, 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 wicka. Saul has killed his thousands. But David his 10,000s. But David his 10,000. Saul heard the song and wasn't pleased. I'm just imagining that's kind of what it sounded like. This made Saul very angry. What's this, he said. They credit David with 10,000s and me with only thousands? Next, they'll be making him their king. Let's read verse 9 out loud together. Ready? Here we go. From that time on, Saul kept a jealous eye on David. Isn't that interesting? Isn't that interesting? From that time on, Saul kept a jealous eye on David. So rather than getting in line with the women that were singing the song of David, Saul began to manifest a spirit of jealousy, which would ultimately become the undoing of his kingship. On the heels of a great victory, he should have been dancing with success and singing the song of David with the women. But rather than that, he quelled and quieted, and in his heart, he despised the song. Do you know what would have happened had Saul sung the song of David? You never would have heard of the 23rd Psalm. You never would have heard of Bathsheba. You never would have heard of Josiah the general. You never would have heard of Nathan the priest. You only would have heard of Saul because Saul would have ruled with dominion for 100 years. But because of that spirit of jealousy that preyed on his lowest base form of human nature, he lost the throne of Israel. You see, all of us have a human nature, and all of us look across the fence and we see that greener grass over there, and we think they have it better, and we long for what they have, and we begin to be jealous in our own heart. This morning, I believe that God is speaking tenderly to hearts, and He's wanting you to know that you are not an accident. You are not a mistake. You were not made with God's leftover parts. You were made on the drafting table of heaven, and the CAD drawing was done with precision, and you have been created by God to do great and marvelous things for Him. I love in Ephesians chapter 2 and verse 10, he says that we are His workmanship. That word workmanship is the Greek word poiema, meaning masterpiece. You are Raphael, you are a Donatello, you are Michelangelo and the rest of the Ninja Turtles. You are an amazing masterpiece of God. You are not a mistake. God is calling you to discover your divine design and walk with confidence in Him. Now, today I want to give you the inoculation. I want to give you the injection to defeat a spirit of jealousy. Are you ready to learn how to beat that spirit? You see, jealousy is a predator. Jealousy is a predator. And it preys on four specific character deficiencies. Tina and I, we love to watch the Nature Channel because we like looking and learning about animals and such. And I remember we were watching this one episode of the Nature Channel, and the narrator's in the background, right? And it's when the cheetah is going to track down the gazelle and kill it. Have you seen those kind of episodes? Out in the Serengeti, the cheetah's lying in the tall grass. He sees the prey out there and knows that he can get him. And he starts to whisper, right? So like that, he's in a film room editing somewhere. They can't hear him, but he starts, and the cheetah's gonna go get him. And then all of a sudden the music drums up and you see the cheetah spring. And Tina and I are watching the same show and I'm like, get him. And she's saying, run. We're watching I'm looking at her like, don't you want the cheetah to kill him? No, get away. You see, the enemy of our soul, he's a predator. And he preys on 4 specific character deficiencies. Here's the 4 of them. The first one is insecurity. You see, when we don't know whose we are, we'll feel a need to prove who we are. That's what happened to Saul when he heard the song of David. He didn't know his identity. He didn't know whose he was, really. He really didn't know that he was touched by God to ascend to a royal position. And because he didn't lack that positive affirmation of knowledge, he began to be very insecure. Number 2 is suspicion. We get suspicious. Because in suspicion, there's a survival mentality that creates this sense of anonymity. We look around with skepticism and cynicism, and we're just waiting for people to disappoint us and do the wrong. See, I told you, I knew that they were up to no good. We get suspicious. Number 3, self-mindedness. Because when we are building our kingdom, we can't build the kingdom. And what the enemy of your soul does not want you to do, the enemy does not want you to build the kingdom. He wants you to try to build your kingdom. And when you're building your kingdom, you get off track and lose sense of your divine design. That's why you've got to have the local church. See, so many of us think that people are our enemy. Can I just tell you right now, your boss is not the enemy. The neighbor across the street who plays their music too loud is not the enemy. The people in the workplace that make your life a living hell are not the enemy. Your mother-in-law, coin flip. People are not the enemy. The enemy is the enemy. The enemy is the enemy. And he wants you to be self-minded. And number 4, finally, is the word indifference. Indifference. Because if we don't care, then we won't feel. If we don't care, if we say that W word, whatever. When we say that we don't care, then what that tells us is that we don't feel. But when we say we don't care, we're just telling on ourselves because we really do feel. And we get insecure and we get suspicious and we get self-centered. And then we begin to get off track and we start to project a wish for someone else's life to be our own. That's what happened to Saul. So I believe that what the Holy Spirit would breathe on you this morning, he would want you to know that there's a cultivation that has to happen to the soils of your soul. Because what happens is, and we know from the synoptic gospels, when Jesus tells the story of the 4 different kinds of soil, the kind that has packed down soil, or the thistles that grow up in it, or the one that's not very deep. What happens in that first kind of soil is it gets packed down from relationships, pressures of finances, physical sickness and disease, disappointment in our dreams and goals. And then our life gets packed down and God drops the seed of vision and dreams and hopes. But the birds come and they eat that seed and snatch it away because our soil is not soft. You see, I would submit to you that the soil of Saul's heart had been packed down by his insecurities, by his suspicions, by his self-mindedness, and by his indifference, so much so that it cost him the throne. What's it costing you today? That sense of comparison and that sense of inadequacy. God wants you to arise today to the rightful birthplace of sons and daughters of the place that you should hold in your own hearts. There's 4 cultivations I want to share very briefly this morning, and I believe they're going to be salient or significant to you. Here's the first of 4. We need to cultivate a sense of godly confidence, not self-confidence. You see, our world teaches us, be confident in yourself. Be confident in yourself. Have self-esteem, have self-worth, have self-confidence. The only problem is that's a Burmese tiger trap with punji sticks at the bottom. You're going to be getting impaled if you go that way. God doesn't want you to build self-confidence. He wants you to build God confidence, because confidence in your God leads you to the impossible. Confidence in your God leads you to the things that you can't do on your own strength. Confidence in your God leads you to look in the face of the giant and say, neener, neener, neener. That's what we say in America. Neener. God does not want you to be filled with self-confidence. He wants you to be filled with God confidence. Let's take a picture, shall we? A little snapshot of how confident Saul was. Now, here's what we know from the Bible. The Bible tells us that he was head and shoulders taller above everybody else. He was the best looking. He was the most wealthy. He was touched by God. Now, in 1 Samuel 10, verse 20, it says, so Samuel, the prophet, brought all the tribes of Israel before the Lord, and the tribe of Benjamin was chosen by lot. Then he brought each family of the tribe of Benjamin before the Lord, and the tribe of the Metrites was chosen. And finally, Saul, son of Kish, was chosen among them. But when they looked for him, he had disappeared. So they asked the Lord, where is he? Check it out. The Lord said, he's hiding in the luggage. It's kind of like an ostrich, right? An ostrich is like taller than me, but they put their head in the sand because here's what they're thinking. I know that because I've talked to several ostriches and I've got their opinion. If I can't see you, I must be invisible. And so many times when our self-confidence breaks down, we become insecure, suspicious, self-minded, and indifferent. God wants you to cultivate a sense of godly confidence. Now, we have just oodles and oodles of kids and young people. And I was over at our friend's house, and they had on their child's wall, there was this poster, and it was supposed to be like this affirming, warm, loving child poster, and it blatantly offended me. And I didn't know why. It just bothered me, but it did. Have you ever have you ever pet a cat backwards, rub its fur the wrong way, just see what they'll do? That's what it did to me. And I didn't know why. And so I started thinking about it, and here was the poster. It was a poster of a cat, interestingly enough. And the caption had a rope with a knot at the end of it, and the cat was clawed into the knot at the end of the rope. And here's what the caption read. When you come to the end of your rope, tie a knot and hang on. And there was something about that phrase that bothered me. And I said, Lord, why am I so bothered by that? And here's what the Lord told me. He said, because that poster has captured the essence of what humanity does. Because what I want humanity to do when they come to the end of their rope is let go. You see, we tie a knot and hang on for all we're worth. But let me just tell you, my friends, you don't get to the beginning of God until you get to the end of you. And God has a way of getting us to the end of us so we can get to the beginning of Him so that we can get on with getting on with life. But so often we become jealous and insecure, and we become neurotic, we become afraid. We tie a knot and we just hang on with claws. And God's saying, I don't want you to tie a knot at the end of the rope. I want you just to get to the end of the rope and let go. Because you see, if Saul had just fallen into the arms of a trusting God, and if he had just put his confidence in the Lord, don't you find it interesting that David wrote 80% of the book of Psalms, and more than 35 times, I believe it's 35 times, he says, I have put my confidence in the Lord. Don't you think he was watching King Saul not have confidence in the Lord and said, yep, that's my kind of mentorship. He did it wrong, I'm gonna do it right. We need to cultivate a sense of godly confidence. Do you know what that requires? That requires us living by insight, not by eyesight. Oh, let me say that again, because that's tweet-worthy right there, at RogerRogerTwitter.com. We've got to live by insight, not by eyesight. We got to live by what He has said, not by what we see. What that's called is living by faith. And you cannot serve a giant-sized God with human-sized effort. You've got to come to the end of yourself and simply let go and trust in someone bigger than yourself. His name is Jesus. I'd like you to meet Him. The second soil we need to cultivate is a trusting spirit. We need to cultivate a trusting spirit. We We need to cultivate a trusting spirit. I've met so many people that have been so hurt by Christians, legitimately hurt. By people that they went to a church hoping to find some kind of relief for their pain or the thing that was ailing them, only to have this encounter with someone who knew a little bit about the Bible, just enough to make them dangerous, and in fact they were. And so they got tainted and tarnished. And here's what people have said across my sphere of influence. They have said, you know, it's God that I love, but people that I hate. Do you know what people are? God practice. No, seriously, think about this. There's not like this switch that you flip and you start worshiping God, and then you turn that switch off and get into the world that you live in and start hating the creation. As a matter of fact, in 1 John 4, it says you cannot love God that you have not seen and hate your brother who you have. What would that worship song even sound like? I love you, Lord, but I hate Irene. I mean, well, what would that sound like? We have to be people that would be willing to trust other people because we are God practice for one another. Now, may I just tell you that people are going to disappoint you. Pastor Mark is never going to want to break your heart, but he will. Pastor Lee will never want to disappoint you, but it's going to happen. The spiritual leaders in your life are never going to want to do things that will disappoint you, but because we are, mortal, it's going to happen. But that does not preclude us from being people that learn how to trust people, because let me tell you this, the greater capacity you have to trust people will be directly proportional to your ability to trust God. And in order to trust, we must entrust. In order to trust, we must entrust. Number 3, we must cultivate an other's mindset. We must cultivate an other's mindset. You see, I believe Saul was so concerned about preservation, right? Saul was so concerned about preserving his estate, his throne, his empire. He was so concerned about preservation that was the beginning of the end of his rule and his reign. Because the minute you begin to close your fist, you cannot open your hand. Oh, that's deep right there. We need to cultivate an other's mindset. We need to seek ways and take opportunities to sing another's song. Several years ago, our church is 19 years old. And it was so cute when we started because it was my beautiful wife and my 3 children, and they were all super tiny, miniature people. And we just had this little house Bible study, and people were coming over and they were getting to know us. And our church has never grown exponentially, oh my gosh, we grew 5,000 in 1 year. Never. In 19 years, it's never grown more than 15% a year. But it's grown at least 15% every year. I mean, that's pretty remarkable. Do you know that your best life is not built in a day, but daily? Your best life is not built in a day, but it's built every single day. And so we started building the church, and when we were 3 years in, now our town, Puyallup, is about 40 minutes outside of Seattle, and it's 30,000 people, and we were, in year 3, we were about 400 people, and we thought, man, we are something else. We're on the rise, we're the up-and-comers, we're getting busy. Well, the neighboring town over, the town of Sumner, is about 70,000 people, and there's a church there called Calvary Community. And everyone in the whole Puget Sound, they know about Calvary Community because that church was about 7,000 people. Now, in my town, Puyallup, there was a defunct, broken down, disheveled old church building that had been condemned. And I had heard the rumor that the pastor, Ray Armstrong, was moving his church, his giant 600-pound gorilla, into the land of the little monkeys. And my heart began to palpitate. I'm telling you right now, here's how I was praying. Lord, you know that he's more elderly than me. Just take him. Just pull an Ezekiel, Lord. Just wheel within a wheel. Just Elijah him, God. Just get Elijah him. Get him up. Take him out. I was jealous. And then, somebody just snorted. It's so precious. I mean, I heard that. It means I've reached your heart if I snort your nose. So God, God had begun to speak to me about my jealousy about Pastor Ray and Calvary Community possibly coming to my town. And I'm like, God, don't you see what we've done for you? Jeez. Have you ever done that whine prayer with God? Like God's going like, stop it already, Jesus. Tell him, son. Tell him to knock it off. And so I was jealous of Ray, and I was insecure, and I was suspicious, and I was, And God said, Roger, here's what he did. Watch this. Here's what God did. You get yourself over here, and you better make friends with Ray. That's what he did. And so I called up Ray and said, Ray, let's go to Starbucks and have coffee. I want to meet you. And he goes, oh, okay. So we sit down and start talking. And, it's kind of that weird jousting with, people that don't really know each other. And he says, can I be honest with you? I said, yeah. He goes, I want you to know I'm a little bit jealous of you. Ray, we're 400 people. You have more staff than we have people. He says, yeah, but you're on the rise, you're an up-and-comer, and some of our families are making their way over to Puyallup, and I just want you to know, he says, I want to just get it out there. I felt that big. I wanted to slide under the door on the way out. Well, there was this military family. We have a lot of military around our neck of the woods, and this military family, sharp-looking officers, husband and wife, both officers, and their kids were there, and they're all put together. And she sees our Bibles because, we're doing the pastor thing. We got our Bibles out, and we're talking about Jesus, and, she overhears God. And she goes, hi, y'all. We're from South Carolina, and we just moved into Fort Lewis, and we're looking for a good church. Can y'all recommend a good church for us? And I kid you not, here's what I heard the Lord say. Do the right thing, and I'll bless you. And so then I spoke up first because I have that gift of divine disturbance. And so I leaped in. I said, so where do you live? She goes, well, we moved into Puyallup. I go, oh, this is low-hanging fruit. I got him, got this family. And the Lord told me again, do the right thing and I'll bless you. And I knew exactly what he meant. And then I heard these words come out of my mouth. And it felt like an out-of-body experience. Like I was hovering above myself because I know that I wouldn't say that, but that person sitting there did. And I said, I'd like to introduce you to Pastor Ray Armstrong. He's just a town over in Sumner, but pretty close to where you are. He's the greatest pastor in the area in all of Puget Sound. And if you go to his church, I promise you, he will shepherd you well, and your children will be well cared for. Your young people will be well cared for. You and your husband have great marriage ministry. They have a full service church, and you will not be disappointed if you go to Ray's church. He's looking across like, they went to his church, and they stayed there until they got rotated out and got a new tour of duty. When they left, he said, that's not what people say about you. I said, what do people say about me? They said, they say you're a hot shot and you're kind of self-centered and you're kind of about your thing. I said, that's my reputation? He goes, yeah, but I'm here to tell you right now, they're all liars and they're all wrong. I'm glad he didn't hear the other stuff I said right before I got there. But do you know what I learned that day? When you sing another song, you open up the possibility of what God will do for you. Because you know what's kind of cute right now? Our church is bigger than Ray's. So you need to cultivate an other's mindset. You need to sing another song. You need to sing the song of those who are being victorious with those in your sphere and your proximity. And if you will cultivate that other's mindset, you will kill that spirit of jealousy that lives within you. It just can't dwell. It can't live there. I promise you. I promise you. You are not a mistake. You are not second rate. You are not second class. You are a masterpiece. You are a poemia in the mind of God. And if you will just sing another song, jealousy cannot reside in that domain. Fourth and finally, I would say to you this, that we need to cultivate a vulnerable heart. We need to cultivate a vulnerable heart. Because here's what we know, and here's what Saul learned, that relationships always have an element of risk, don't they? Don't you find that true? How many have been married for more than 10 years? How many know that's risky? There's an element of risk in every relationship. Come on, if you've ever dated someone only to have them betray you, if you've ever been married to someone to have them break their marital vows, if you've ever started a business with someone only to have them defraud you, you know how mortal people can be. And then what can happen to our heart is it begins to wax cold, and we build this defense mechanism. We build up a wall, and we say these words, "You will never hurt me again." And then do you know how we reach out? We reach with alligator arms. Do you know how you do that? I don't want to live my life with alligator arms. I want to live my life with human arms. That's why he put the elbow where he did. You see, what God wants you to have, my friends, is he wants you to have a rhinoceros hide and a rose petal heart. Because here's the combination that I find to be true. Oftentimes, we're going to have very, very rose petal skin and a rose petal heart, and we become a victim. Oftentimes, we will have, and that gives way to something else, where we will have this incredible rose petal skin, but then we get a rhinoceros heart. But what God would have you to walk in is this sense of having very, very tough skin and a very, very tender heart. And you've got to keep that heart vulnerable. You've got to keep it open. Love will find a way if your heart is open. Love will find a way if your heart is open. Love will find a way if your heart is open. But the moment your heart gets closed because of jealousy, your world becomes smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. And you become less fulfilled, less fulfilled, less fulfilled, less fulfilled. You become more jealous, more jealous, more jealous, more jealous. And then you become a sad caricature of God's glorious divine design for your life. Come on, we don't want to be like Saul. We want to sing another song. I believe the Holy Spirit is speaking to your heart today because he's inviting you to confidence, not in yourself, but in him. I believe God is speaking to your heart, and he is saying, I invite you to slay that predator that's been stalking you in the Serengeti of your soul. God is inviting you to walk in the completeness of your divine design. And the way we get to that place is by singing another's song.